whistle has not long gone at the Etihad. Manchester City 1, Chelsea 1. Mark Donaldson, Stevie Nicol, Rob Dawson. Let's head to the Etihad. Rob, 1-1. City were behind for long spells in that game after Raheem Sterling's opener. They got an equaliser. Should they have had more, or was that a fair result for you?
Well, it's difficult to say. I mean, I think City probably will leave there disappointed. They've dropped points at home. They've had 32 shots, only scored once. They've had to rely on quite a late equaliser to get anything from the game. Chelsea were fantastic, really, for the best part of an hour. City will point to the fact that they've won points from a losing position again. It shows their character, their desire to win, or at least to defend all those trophies that they won last season. On the balance of it, maybe a fair result, but both teams will probably have reason to believe they could have got more.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Chelsea tactics. I know we're having one or two issues with Stevie Nicol, but Chelsea, Stevie, I thought were exemplary. The way that they went about the game, their tactics. They had a bit of fortune. Erling Haaland on another day probably gets a hat-trick. But I thought some of the defending for Chelsea, you probably appreciate that, being a good defender yourself.
Yeah, I thought the whole back four were absolutely brilliant. Gusto at right back had a lot to deal with and dealt with it admirably. Chilwell on the other side didn't have as much to do. But the two centre backs and Disasi, I don't know where this performance came from because Disasi has been about as average as possible to be all season. And I think and I hope that Pochettino will now forget this playing Collywell at left back, regardless of whether there's injuries or not, because he's a centre back. Today, he was absolutely brilliant. And so, yeah, the back four. And quite honestly, Petrovic in goal, I can only remember one real save he had to make was from a shot from Haaland that took a little nick from Disasi that he had to push out for a corner. But other than that, City didn't really make a whole lot of chances. Obviously, the two headers that Haaland had. But other than that, it was about great defending and really stopping any real threat in and around that penalty box.
Rob, I said in the intro that Haaland on another day gets a hat-trick. These are chances that he would normally put away easily. Is it a wee bit of rust after his time out of the side injured?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point because he obviously scored twice against Everton, and people assumed immediately that he's back and he's back from injury, and it's the same old Haaland. But he didn't look the same player in midweek. I didn't think against Copenhagen. City were dominant in that game, but he did look a little bit rusty, maybe a slightly off the pace. And I thought today it was the same again. I mean, that header from Kevin De Bruyne's cross in the second half, that's the chance that he puts away 99 times out of 100. And you're right, on a different day, he has a hat-trick. I think he had 10 shots there. That's the most shots he's had in a Premier League game without scoring since he arrived at City. That tells you kind of the kind of day that he's had. I mean, I think that was probably the thing for a few City players, really. It was just one of those days, one of those days where things weren't quite as slick as they have been. A couple of passes were misplaced, they were a little bit sloppy. I think, you said there that Chelsea deserve credit, and they do. Chelsea deserve credit for knocking them out of their rhythm, especially in the first half. I thought they were probably the better team. But you're right. I mean, maybe this is one that City have kind of got away with a little bit. And then next week, Haaland is back scoring goals again, and we're praising them and saying what a fantastic football team they are. The title race is long, and it takes a lot of games to win these titles. You do have to suffer a little bit, and maybe this is just one of those games where City have had to suffer. Luckily for them, they managed to escape with a point.
Yeah, Stevie, for as good as City are, you always get a chance against them, don't you? And prior to Raheem Sterling opening the scoring, there was that Malo Gusto cross, which Nico Jackson on another day might have put away. It wasn't the best bit of touch and control, to say the least.
I don't know about another day. Probably would do the same thing.
Well, but then they got the goal through Raheem Sterling, and it's weird because when it first comes across, you think, oh, he's blown it. But then he brings it back on. There's a little touch from Kyle Walker that just sets up nicely for him, and it's a really good finish. But Chelsea were getting chances, weren't they?
Well, I don't think we should be too surprised. Listen, City's only got 2 clean sheets in the last 14 Premier League games.
That's the point.
So it's not a surprise. They fling people forward, and most teams these days have got plenty of pace going forward. And so when you leave a lot of space, then you're open to the counter attack. And City all season haven't been able to deal with it. It's interesting we're talking about Haaland's 2 misses, but you can say that if he scores those goals, they win the game. But I don't think we can say that without Edison making that save at 1-0, they don't get any points. So you can choose to look at it whatever way you want. Either Haaland missing or Edison. Anybody who never believed in the saying of having a great goalkeeper gets you points during the season. Well, today is the day that proved that, because there's no question, without that save from Edison, they don't get any points. In the end, they could have got 3, but they'll settle for 1, considering the chances that Chelsea had and considering the misses from Haaland.
Yeah, it's fine margins, isn't it? Because you speak about Petrovic at the other end, maybe not being as busy as you would think from the number of chances that City had, but I think it was the 55th minute, Rob, and it was a good ball in. I'm not sure what more Sterling can do, and most of the time against normal goalkeepers, that's in the back of the net, and at 2-0, it would have been very difficult for City to come back. It's a good point by Stevie. Without Ederson at the other end, he has these moments, don't get me wrong, but that was a world-class save, and it earned, ultimately, City a point, Rob.
It did, and he made a horrible mistake in midweek against Copenhagen that briefly let them back in the game. And we talk about Edison a lot, the ability that he's got with the ball at his feet, how he helps City to play out from the back, and he's got that ability to go long to Haaland as well. I think probably his shot stopping is a little bit underrated, and he showed that today. And it's certainly not one of those point blank saves where the ball just hits him. He just happens to be in the right place at the right time. The ground he covers across the line to get to the far post to stop that. It is absolutely phenomenal. And we talk a lot about City and how great they are, and we talk about Haaland and De Bruyne and Diaz and Rodri. It really should not be underappreciated how important Edison is to this team. And predominantly goalkeepers are there to make saves, and he saved his team today. It's probably one of the saves of the season.
It was a brilliant save. And Stevie, we talk about turning points, and City hadn't lost at the Etihad since Brentford beat them 2-1 in November 2022. And basically from that point onwards, that was really the last we saw of Chelsea as an attacking force. They got deeper and deeper, but they were still able to preserve the 4. And then the goal came about, a shot from Kyle Walker that was deflected and ended up heading into the path of Rodri. It's a really good finish. It does take a deflection. It's probably heading in anyway. At that stage, just before they scored, did you get the feeling it was a case of when and not if City were going to equalise?
Yeah, I did, because Chelsea had put so much into the game. Just on the defensive side alone, that takes a lot out of you. And the fact that when they did break, they were breaking in numbers. This wasn't just Jackson on his own or Sterling. This was Conor Gallagher getting up there. Enzo Fernandez was getting up there. Palmer was trying to get there. I think as well we got to look at Cole Palmer. He did as much defending today as anybody, and he did a great job on that side. So right across the board, Chelsea defensively, we talk about defending from the front, and that's what they did. The whole 11 did the job today, and some. And so when you're doing that much work defensively, when you're breaking at such pace, eventually you run out of gas, and Chelsea run out of gas, and that's why, to your question, I felt as though after the Edison save, can they last? Can Chelsea last? And really what I'm thinking during the game was, will it be 2-1? Because I did feel as though it was going to be 1-1. I thought City were going to eventually just through sheer willpower and possession, we're going to get something. Unfortunately, and deservedly so, I think Chelsea deserved the point. I think it would have been really tough on them if they had lost a late goal to lose this game 2-1. I think they, no question, deserved the point. And again, it just goes to show, doesn't matter how much possession you have, it's what you do with it. For all the possession City had, they didn't do enough with it. Certainly didn't do as much as Chelsea did with the possession that they had.
Okay, we're in the dying embers of this one, Rob, and you're about to press send when the full-time whistle goes on your match report. And then suddenly there's the announcement on the big screen, VAR check in progress. I think it was Colwill who was involved. It was a potential handball. Did you get a good view of it? Did you see it again on a monitor? And what did you think? The check was cleared and it was a corner after all that.
Yeah, we saw it again on the monitors. To be honest, I was surprised that it even went to VAR in the stadium. You know, obviously everything is checked, but there's only so many incidents that get announced in the stadium that VAR are checking for a possible penalty. That was one that got announced. Obviously, at that point, you know, the City fans get up and think they're about to be awarded a penalty. But to be honest, looking at the replay, I thought it would have been very, very harsh. The ball kind of lands on Colville a little bit, and he turns to try and shape to boot it clear, and he ends up sort of punching it down towards his own goal. You can kind of see that in the past, incidents like that have been given as a penalty. I'm glad that it wasn't given as a penalty, because I just don't think it was. I'm not really sure what else Colwell could have done to avoid the ball hitting his hand. Again, you know, I've seen so many incidents this season where it makes you question what you know about the handball rule at all. So I'm quite glad that one didn't get given.
Stevie, on that, and I think we all agree that we didn't think it was a penalty. Look, if you're a City fan, you'll think, things like that have been given. But I think we're slowly going in the right direction. That VAR's not there to re-referee games. It's there to clear up clear and obvious errors. I didn't think that was a clear and obvious error by the referee. Did you?
No, I think the referee got it spot on. I guess I think we're all in agreement. I'm certainly in agreement with Rob, but the problem is we've seen decisions that make you scratch your head, and so you're actually watching it, and I'm talking. It's a surprise. I'm talking to myself and shouting at the TV, but I'm shouting it's not a penalty kick. But then there's the thing in the back of your head going, well, stranger things have happened when it's come to VAR. But as Rob said, thankfully it wasn't given, because my goodness, what a travesty it would have been. But fortunately, cool heads and a good decision from VAR and the referee, and we got the right outcome.
Rob, I know you've got to head off to the post-match interviews. Just one final one for you before Stevie and I get into the title race. With Chelsea at home to Wolves, they should win that, and they get thumped. Then they go to Villa now. That's a home win for Villa, and then Chelsea win away. How do we approach Chelsea for the rest of the season with that in mind, and knowing the performance they put at the Etihad, when it comes to trying to predict what they're going to do?
I've got no idea, genuinely. I was sat in Pep Guardiola's press conference on Friday, and he sat down and he said that how difficult this Chelsea team were going to be, what a difficult game it was going to be. He actually called it the most difficult game that City were going to have between now and the end of the season. And there were a couple of smirks between journalists, a couple of sort of sideways looks as if to say, what's he on about? This is a team that got battered at home 4-2 by Wolves not so long ago. I just don't think that you can really predict Chelsea at the moment. They've shown so much positivity today in the way that they've played, but you wouldn't expect them to go and replicate that next week and the week after that. I think at the moment Pochettino is really just trying to show enough to make sure that he keeps the job for next season. Obviously it's a team in transition. They've spent an awful lot of money on new players. It's a squad that needs molded together. Clearly, for on today's evidence, they can do it. They probably need a centre forward to be able to put some of those chances away, but in terms of the way that the team plays and the team is set up, clearly they can do it, because they've shown it at possibly the hardest Premier League ground in the country. The problem is that consistency, and they're not the only team in the league to be struggling for that consistency. And if you want to qualify for the Champions League, if you want to challenge for the title, you have to be able to do it week in, week out. Pochettino is still struggling to find that. Until he does, obviously his job is going to be under pressure. But I think today we've seen enough to suggest that he should get the job at least next season, at least the start of next season. I think that any doubts that there were about his position sort of moving forward this season, I think have probably been erased today.
Thanks for your time, Rob. Stevie, let's wrap this one up, talk about the title race. Because if City win their game in hand, it's Liverpool 57, City 56, Arsenal 55. 2 points separating 3 teams. Neutrals would have just wanted a title race. Could we have 3 teams battling for the title all the way, or do you expect one to maybe drop out? What do you think is going to happen?
I think we're going to have the 3 of them. I think all 3 of them are not going to win every game between now and the end of the season. I think that's about the only thing we can say. This season so far has taught us that nobody is that far ahead of anybody else as far as the title race is concerned. I still think the City are favourites. I don't think there's much between Liverpool and Arsenal. But I don't think this is going to be straightforward. I think all three sides will drop points. The question is how many and when they do it. So yeah, I absolutely think it's a 3-horse race, and I think it will go all the way to the end.
Arsenal red hot right now. Liverpool doing really well today. Could have scored more, but injuries an issue. And City look like they've pretty much got most available. I hope it doesn't come down to who keeps the most players available for selection. I hope it doesn't come down to luck or fortune, good or bad, whether players are missing or not. And hopefully we can have a 3-horse race. Are you worried at all about these Liverpool injuries and the depth of squad going forward?
I wouldn't say worried. No, I think Curtis Jones was a knock. Nunes was brought off precautionary. So the two of those don't sound particularly bad. They sound like kind of normal things that you pick up. The Jota one, however, doesn't sound very good. The fact that he's carried off on a stretcher. And then Klopp came out after the game and said things didn't look good for Jota. But yeah, worry's not the word. Obviously, you want to avoid that. If you're not going to win it, if you're going to fail, you'd rather fail on your own terms, not because Lady Luck's against you and you end up with 2 and 3 players who would be playing who can't kick a ball for the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. You don't want that. Nobody wants that, and I don't want that for any of the 3 sides. I just hope that everybody stays healthy, and it's kind of may the best team win. That's the ideal scenario for everybody.
It's Luton in midweek as Liverpool are at home at Anfield against the Hatters. That's because they're not playing next weekend in the Premier League. They're playing in the Carabao Cup final against Chelsea. And if you're in the United States, it's live on ESPN+. But today, it was a good one at the Etihad. Manchester City won, Chelsea won. But the biggest winners of the day, though, were Liverpool and Arsenal. Bye for now.